Hello and welcome to You're Booked. I'm Daisy Buchanan, your host, book inspector and aspiring book bailiff. In 1997, I lent a copy of Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie to Emily Attenborough, not knowing that Emily and her family would move to Canada that summer. Emily, if you're listening, give it back. I know there are post offices in Canada. Firstly, my brand new book, The Sisterhood, A Love Letter to the Women Who Shaped Me, is published by Headline on the 7th of March. If you're listening on our release day, that's coming up. It's the eve of International Women's Day, and it'll be available online and from bookshops across the UK, including the margatebookshop.com. This week's guest has a brilliant book out this week. We're talking to Philippa Perry, the author, broadcaster, psychotherapist and agony aunt, on the eve of the publication of her new book, The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read and Your Children Will Be Glad That You Did. Philippa is a writer of great wit, elegance and economy, and this extremely smart self-help book is a life-enhancing font of wisdom, whether you're a parent or have parents. We visited Philippa in North London, where she introduced us to Kevin the cat, revealed she'd fallen out of love with Jane Austen, and baked us a pie. So we're in North London. It's a really beautiful day. It's February, but it is surprisingly spring-like. Downstairs in the kitchen, I'm looking out into the garden. I can see a lot of greenery and plants.
And there's a cat here.
A cat is weaving furry around us.
Who kind of wants his wet food, which I've got up here.
A hungry cat is very jealous of the delicious homemade vegetable pie we're eating.
Okay, one more bite. Wait.
I'll tell you what, while you have a bite, just to sort of to think about. I'm curious about when you were growing up and reading, were there any characters in books that you really saw yourself in, or really struck a chord with you? No, it's my turn for pie.
I have to come back to Jane Austen, which is probably a bit dull of me, because...
Well, I think, she wrote about very universal themes.
She was an observer of life, and I felt like I was an observer of life. And with that arrogance of the adolescent, I probably thought I could see more and interpret more in other people's thoughts and sayings and actions than I actually did. And so I saw her as a mate, like, we too can uncover the hypocrisies of this small, inward-looking world that we inhabit. We will break free and find our own soulmates.
So you saw yourself more as the author
than
as someone created in the author's universe.
I mean, at the time I read them, I desperately wanted to be Lizzie Bennet, but it's terrible when self-knowledge does descend. I realise that I am more Lydia Bennet. I like a good time.
Oh, really?
I like a good time. I'm impulsive, make bad choices.
Because I'm
wild for officers,
I'm the eldest of 6 girls.
Oh, really? My God, you are Jane Bennet.
Yeah, and I hated that. I was like, bloody Jane, she's so boring.
She's
so
boring. Yeah.
But I suppose it's interesting because I've always thought that, because I've obviously, for very, I think, clear reasons, if there's a load of sisters in the book, I'm like, yes, which one am I? But I suppose at a time when telling women's stories was often dismissed, and I think it still is a bit, it's different facets and aspects of womanhood, isn't it? And having different lenses through which to explore them.
Yes, I mean, things like the March sisters and Little Women, it was all kind of like women's concerns of thoughts, feelings, rather than going out into the world and doing stuff. And women's stories were quite often about duty rather than adventure. And I think they were more nuanced and interesting because they did go inward. And I am introspective.
Is there anybody can sound cool and adventurous while they're wrestling a bear? But I think whatever else you think of the March Girls, they created a really sort of a detailed world. And what I love is one of my favourite books, any books where women have fallen on some sort of hard times and they've got to be resourceful, whether it's the Fossil Sisters in ballet shoes going off and like, whoa, I can make 14 shillings a week if I'm in a panto, or Jo selling her hair.
so few opportunities for women to earn money. I'm researching at the moment a documentary for BBC4 about the late Victorians, and there were very limited opportunities for women to make any money. But the growth industry for women was becoming a medium because of they discovered radio waves about then, and the telegraph took off, and then the radio took off, and people thought, what else is out there in the ether? So spiritualism had a massive surge of interest in it, and it was a great way to make money, because if you're a psychic or a medium, what you need more than anything is masses of intuition. And what have women got masses of? Intuition. And so a lot of them became successful mediums and managed to earn a living that way.
You might be horrified by this idea, but I'm thinking about you as a psychotherapist, and this idea that it was an early version of kind of being interested, I suppose, in the psyche and the mind, and listening and observing and interpreting.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Freud, this was the bed in which Freud came to blossom, wasn't it? And his forays into the unconscious, and that we have this unconscious and that we are ruled by it, was certainly of its time there. It just happens to be an idea that took hold and has kept hold. So yes, I definitely come from there. I am examining my roots.
If you could, would you have sort of a big spangly? Maybe you do have a big starry shawl and some sort of an array of props.
I absolutely wouldn't, because although I think there are some things we don't understand about how, say, for instance, body to body communication happens, how do we pick up on an atmosphere in the room? You know, we don't know everything about that, but we know we do it. I don't like to say we do it because of magic. I like to say, you know, we all have our own experiences, but we needn't rush to conclusions about why we have them.
I guess there are so many different ways of, intelligence, isn't it, beyond sort of the purely... I suppose it's all kind of cerebral.
I wouldn't call it cerebral. I mean, I think, when you are lying down with a baby, say, you can't have a cerebral relationship with them, but you can sort of synchronise your breathing, notice the give and take to and fro of facial expressions or little noises. There's definitely the blueprint of dialogue there, even though we might not have actual words. That sound you can hear is the cat wanting to go out.
When you said that, I came up with a much less lovely example, which is possibly the reason I went freelance. When you work in an office and you come back from lunch and there's this real, something has happened in my lunch hour, and someone somewhere is very, very angry, and you just feel it.
That's interesting. And I wouldn't say that was cerebral. I would say, maybe the very hairs on your skin are picking something up. We're not sure how it happens.
But I suppose, I think I used the wrong word, but perhaps more, in the brain than in the mind. I was wondering whether it was a part of your brain is processing something that a body is doing, but it's not a verbal communication or one that can perhaps be articulated. Before I forget, because I'm holding this beautiful edition of Persuasion. I love it. It's a Penguin English Library one, and it's
well thumbed, is it not?
This is a loved book. I mean, it's kind of a shit cover. It's a really sort of a lonely grey house.
That is the Cobbett line. Regis.
This is definitely the Jane Austen I know the least well.
Oh, really?
Is this your favourite, or is this the one that you had?
I don't have favourites of anything.
Oh, I don't believe you.
I don't, because I move about, I change. I'm not made of stone. I'm a plastic person, so what
have you read
suits
this
my mood one
more
day.
Than once?
Oh, God, I've read Austen. I'd say I'd read each Austen book, including the letters and the other things. I've read them about over 20 times each, I'd say.
So do you have an Austen for a particular mood? What is your persuasion mood?
Well, I've come to the conclusion, and it's terribly sad, really, that Austen was a terrible snob, and we wouldn't have got on in real life. So I've sort of come full circle with Austen. I had a love affair with her writing, her mind, her keen observation. But she was such a snob. Her thing with elegance and her thing with reserve and dignity, it's got me down lately. Actually, I think we're through, me and her.
Oh, wow.
So I'm no longer hero worshipping her.
I mean, that is a hell of a...
I know. It's sad, isn't it? It's almost like we need a divorce.
Because how do you, when someone has occupied that space? Because, again, as you say, being that point of connection and, this idea of her as an observer and as the observer that you thought you wanted to be. I do wonder whether...
She judges. That's what I don't like about her. She doesn't just observe. She judges and she damns. I mean, her preference for people in, say, Mansfield Park is Fanny Price. I mean, what a bore Fanny Price is. Compared to, say, the very spirited Mary Crawford, who has improper thinking because she makes dirty jokes. I know who I want to spend the evening with, and it isn't Fanny.
I am
Sure.
the only Fanny Price defender I know, because I think that she is just paralysed by fear of doing the right thing, and she so wants to be just, good, and she wants everybody to have a nice time, and, she's just very frightened and never knows where to put herself, and that was how I felt when I was a child and how I still do. And I think but because there are so many sort of, it's that.
Well, you are charming. Mary, maybe Fanny would be charming too. You are charming in your way of not falling back on a ready-made script, but thinking what you are thinking in the moment and sharing that and taking that risk. And, you share your vulnerability like that. Fanny, bloody mouse, you're not like Fanny.
I suppose
it's not her fault. Of course it's not her fault. And I'm sure if I met her, we'd get on just great.
Perhaps Fanny never transforms herself in the way that we'd like to.
She's perfect already, isn't she?
Maybe what you really want is for Fanny to have a sort of a final act, a bit of oomph. A bit, because also the other thing is as well.
Edmund. I'm sure she dies in childbirth. But she would have died in childbirth because she was so feeble.
And that's a very neat way, isn't it, of her exempting herself from the parenting challenge. You never need to think about sort of Fanny Price as a mother, someone, because that would have to toughen her up, wouldn't it? She'd have to learn to kind of impart some wisdom.
No,
but
she wouldn't. She might be all right because she might just allow the child to be.
That's
and learn from the
I'd
child.
like to write that, I have no business doing.
Oh, you're going to write the sequel to.
Imagine writing a sequel where she has a baby and she sort of gets her shit together and she finds a way to roar.
Oh yeah, because you do roar when you've had a baby because, you become a she-wolf and you're protecting this tiny little thing. She might roar at Lady Bertram, mightn't she?
I think she would. I'm optimistic.
Do you think she'd breastfeed until the kid was 6 years old and wouldn't let the baby be alone at night?
On a Mumsnet forum complaining about plastic toys and party bags. I think we ought to have all...
wooden toys.
My Ermintrude is going plastic free.
Yeah. Ermintrude just likes playing with leaves in the garden.
Ermintrude died when she was 4 because she ate a poisonous mushroom.
Yeah, she probably did.
What fiction books or novels or old books do you wish your own parents had read? And do you have any favourite parents in novels and parents that you think are good, bad examples? Sorry.
When you mentioned parents, I immediately thought of Pride and Prejudice and Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. And what we have there are two parents who don't get on, don't have any common ground, and he gets by with sarcasm and she gets by being a hypochondriac. And I just wonder how that is replicated and has been throughout time, where parents sort of stay together but haven't really got anything in common at all. But they each love their children in their own way. Mrs. Bennet wants them to be financially secure. Mr. Bennet wants them to be intellectually fulfilled. and he thinks that he's sort of framed as the goody in some way because he doesn't want his children to marry people they don't respect.
But he's married someone that he doesn't respect.
Well, that's why he doesn't want the same fate for his children, isn't it? So I suppose those are the first parents that come to mind. It's an interesting idea, the thought of parents in literature, because they're usually found to be lacking in some way, aren't they?
It would be a bit boring, wouldn't it, if they weren't?
Well, I suppose
Maybe.
when our parents don't give us something, we've got something incomplete within us that we spend the rest of our life searching for.
That's true. I suppose if you think that every novel, you've really got to have someone who desires someone or something, and it's the fulfillment of that desire, and so you've got to have a need created.
Yeah, even if the desire is to find out who they actually are. Yeah, so often we're not given the tools to have confidence in what we experience and what we feel because we haven't had those feelings validated or mirrored. And so we're looking for that in the outside world, maybe through work, maybe through love. And of course, a lot of novels are about, trying to find oneself.
I think, I've not read this book yet. Kerry Hudson's Lowborn is something I'm really excited to read because that's, I think, so much about the way the circumstances in which you grow up can define you and how you can make sure they don't define you.
Kerry Hudson's former books, Tony Hogan Bought Me an Ice Cream Float Before He Stole My Ma, and Thirst. What blew me away about both of those is that they took me to worlds of which I knew nothing, but which were inhabited by humans who, had the same thoughts and feelings that I have. But I have never known anyone describe the experience of being an immigrant, and in Tony Hogan, what it's like to be poor and shifting from place to place, and what it's like to be born into poverty, to come from poverty and to stay poor, because obviously coming from that background, less people are writers, so you don't hear about it so much in novels. And she just opened my eyes to things that I didn't know about, coming from my comfy middle-class background. And I think she's got such a great voice, and she can tell a story, and she's so readable. I like a book I don't have to work too hard with. I like to be able to be swept along, pulled along by narrative and by characterization and by getting to know something that I didn't know about, but I know a bit about. If it's completely strange, then it's too difficult. If I know a little bit about it, I've got one foot on a ladder, and I can climb up the rest with their help. Talking about learning stuff that I don't know anything about through books, Bernardine Evaristo is someone else who opened my eyes about what it was like. I mean, I've read Mr. Loverman. That blew me away because I've no idea what it's like to be a gay man from Antigua who emigrates to Britain, and he's coming from a place where people get killed for being gay or ostracised. And so it's terrifying for him to come out. So he has to live a lie. And it's such a moving book. And it's heartrending, and it's also funny. So to have wit and also move you is such a clever thing to do. And again, telling me about a world I know nothing about. I have no patience for men, who say, oh, I don't read books by women. As though they only want to know about their world and they don't want to find out about something else. But when I'm reading, I want to find out about other people's lives, other people's viewpoints, other people's experiences. And Kerry and Bernardine Evaristo, they are amazing for that, for opening my eyes. Damien Barr, You'll Be Safe Here. This is going to be published in March.
Oh, I'm glad you picked that up, because when you were talking about Kerry Hudson, I was thinking about his memoir, Maggie and Me. I get a world that I knew so little about, but is described so vividly and evocatively, and even though you don't know those people, you do know him because the writing is so strong.
He has, in this book, he has immersed himself into the history of South Africa from the Boer War to the present day. And it tells a tale, really, of transgenerational trauma and how the trauma rears its head again through every generation. So what happens decades ago, or even, centuries ago, still has an impact on who we are today. And it's such a moving book, and it makes you cry. It makes you bigger rather than smaller, again, because of all the experiences he's researched and magically turned into a gripping novel. Fabulous book.
And I guess that brings us back to your book, doesn't it? And the Bennets and the things that we hold on to and recycle again. And I suppose it happens within families, on a small scale.
I mean, I do say in my book that as parents, we are but a link in a chain. And the chain goes back generations and will go forward generations. And every link, certainly affects those next to it and maybe, affect links to come. So it is our duty to shape our own link as best as we can, because it's not only affecting the generation we're bringing up, but it will affect their children and their children. So I do like this idea of transgenerational legacies. And of course, being a psychotherapist and hearing a lot of family stories and stuff, I've embodied that so much in my work too. I think we have to stop here and let the cat in.
Yeah,
please.
Hello. But very indignant being shut out.
Yeah, sorry about that. Look, there's more books over there. Different sorts of books.
All right, well, first let's talk about...
Lethal White.
Yes, because this is Robert Galbraith. Now, Robert Galbraith is who I think they are.
Yes, they are.
It's not a secret. It's not a spoiler. But this is just... First off, this is an absolute doorstop. But this is vast.
Have you seen? It's been to the swimming pool a few times, that book.
I was going to say, have you read it in the bath?
No, I took it on holiday. And I cannot recommend a better book for by the pool than Lethal White, a strike novel, #1 bestseller, gold lettering, Robert Galbraith. It's wonderful because, unlike a lot of detective novels, you actually really care about all the three-dimensional characters. They're not two-dimensional characters that are just for the plot. She can really fill in a person. There's the detective's assistant, Robin, and you're shouting at her to dump her husband, and it's got all that sort of personal stuff about a novel, plus a really narrative-driven plot for whoddunit. Fabulous, absolutely. And it's been made into TV. Like all the other strike novels.
So it looks like this really stays in your head and consumes you. Do you find?
I can't remember who did it now, but it's just like the best. I love a detective novel. I mean, I even like John Grisham's. I love reading. I'll read anything. But that, if there was another Robert Galbraith book out, I would say we have to cut this short, and I'd be on my bike to the nearest bookshop to get it. I couldn't wait for Amazon to deliver.
That's a hell of a recommendation.
Yeah, I just, it's just entertainment.
Have you always read for just the pleasure of it?
I've read to pass the time because there is a lot of time and it needs filling. And when I was a child, it needed filling like nothing else. And it needed filling with another world that I wasn't in. And I've never let go of that, wanting to know about other worlds. Like that pile over there, the Chinese English Dictionary for Lovers. That's what it's like to immigrate into this country if you're from China. So what a lot we can learn about ourselves from looking at us from an outside point of view. I loved that book. It was great.
That's really arresting, because normally on the back, I'm like, that's not to do with the book. I don't really...
Oh, can you read what it says on the back?
Well, it just really struck me. Now I'm going to do this incorrectly as well. 23-year-old Zhuang or Z as she calls herself, Westons cannot pronounce her name, arrives in London to spend a year learning English. I don't think I did pronounce her name.
No, I can't pronounce it.
Struggling to find her way in the city. And through the puzzles of tense, verb and adverb, she falls for an older Englishman and begins to realise that the landscape of love is an even trickier terrain. I've just realised that you wanted me to read the back so you could finish your pie.
She's got me.
That's
me. Well observed.
Genius move.
It's such a funny book because we realise not only how ridiculous we are, but how ridiculous our language is. And it's funny because we know the language and she invites us to laugh at her and how she gets it wrong. It's fabulous.
We'll be back to Philippa soon, but now it's time for my Steal of the Week, a book that's worth its weight in golden rubies, or at the very least should be read on a Kardashian-style platinum diamond Kindle. This week it's Darling by Rachel Edwards. Darling has fallen in love, but she's struggling to contend with her new stepdaughter Lola, a troubled teen who's furious about the new addition to her family. Edwards writes her characters so skillfully and creates so much depth and nuance that it's impossible to ignore their humanity, even when Lola's behaviour is entirely reprehensible. The twist at the end totally winded me. I'm keeping this a spoiler-free zone, but this is essential reading for fans of smart thrillers. That's Darling by Rachel Edwards, published by Fourth Estate, out now. Now back to Philippa. What do you think is the funniest book you've ever read?
Well, it depends how old I am when I'm reading it. When I was a young girl, I thought Tom Sharp was hilarious. And I recently picked one up and I just thought, oh God, how trite. So, it just depends where you are. I love annoying everybody on the tube by laughing out loud at a book. This is Free Food for Millionaires by Min Jin Lee. I think books that are funny, the best books that are funny are the books that are sad as well as funny. They've got all the emotions there and not just trying to be funny. I mean, if you just read a book now that's trying to be funny, like I read Eric Morecambe's, I can't remember what it was called. Eric Morecambe wrote a book about a travelling salesman.
Mr. Lonely.
Yeah, Mr. Lonely. Mr. Lonely implies tragedy, but it bloody wasn't. It was just like, I couldn't get through it. Trying to be funny is never funny, but life is funny. And so if you write about life well, like Min Jin Lee does, it's funny.
Really want to read that because it looks great. And the description, and your description, made me think of Everything's Illuminated, which there was a film that I did not like so much.
Who is that by?
Is that, I want to say, Jonathan Safran Foer.
Was that wasn't the one about 9/11? Because
I've
I've read all of Safran Foer's work, and I haven't read it for years.
What I remember was...
This is great. We're talking about books we can't quite remember. Oh yeah, it was bloody tragic. I remember it. It was lovely. It was a really great book. I remember it now. It's really, oh God, the bit when they're all burnt in the church, Christ. But of course, his relationship with Alex is so amusing. It's sort of like fun goes on even though these terrible things happen.
I'd forgotten because you've got that liveliness of the letters and the real, the wit of them and the sort of absurdity of them, and it's a real kind of take no prisoners, everything and everybody is up for a send-up, but then the tragic story that kind of intercuts it. But now it's amazing how a book can just consume you and stay with you and be all you think about when you're reading it, and then to my eternal shame, what would I forget?
Oh yeah,
I know you had to look that one up. Do you tend to remember?
Well, that was out in 2002, which is now 2019. I think 17 years ago since I read the book, I'm allowed to forget bits of it. But I'm sure things I learnt stayed with me in the process of how I learnt them and the process of the book, even if the content faded. The generalised truths. Maybe I learnt about transgenerational trauma in that book. I don't know how I picked that up or how I learnt about it. Of course, I learnt about it in my therapy training, but how it was illustrated, Yeah, of course. I mean, who knows? I'm ready for more coffee. Does anybody else want a sort of drink? He wants the coffee sounds, doesn't he? Fun, isn't it? Let's have coffee sounds.
What was I going to say?
I don't know, because I interrupted you.
Oh, that was in the way that you were saying about the things we sense and the ways that we communicate that aren't in the mind, but they're felt and they're real and they're intuited. I think there's something about that with books, that they, even if we can't remember exactly what happened or why. We can always remember the sense of them and how they made us feel.
Exactly. We have an emotional memory that remembers the process of reading it and sort of what we learnt on a bodily level in the book, even if we forget the content or the plot or who did it.
And I do wonder whether every single book is different depending on when we read it and when we come to it.
Well, a book, what is it? It's the words of an author written down. So in a way, a book is a relationship with the person telling you a story. And you know, in your relationships with people, they affect you. We affect each other. And in the same way, once we've been affected by a book, I think we retain some of that effect.
Definitely. You should do this. You should be a professional. So nailed. Do you ever listen to books on tape or books on phone, I guess is what we have now?
Books on tape. I love it. I can only read some people on tape. Yeah, for instance, I can't read Will South. I have to keep stopping to look up words that I don't know the meaning of.
Oh, you can't read him in a book. In a book, you have to listen to him.
Really enjoyed, because he reads it himself too, and he's got a very sardonic tone. I really enjoyed Umbrella, about a lunatic asylum, and do you like the coffee sounds? Good. Yeah, that was great. Although I feel bad bigging up his book because he and my friend are going through a terrible divorce.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
And I'm so on Deborah's side, obviously. Just want to make that clear.
For the record, we can take that out. We can take out the bit about his book if you like. If you don't.
No, keep the whole thing, and keep the whole thing me bigging up Deborah. Deborah Orr, who is writing a book called Motherwell, about her mother, I think, who came from Motherwell.
That is a brilliant name, and I'm a huge fan of her journalism. Wait, has she written other books?
No, this is her first book.
Oh wow, when's it out? Do you know?
I don't think she's finished it yet. Give her a chance.
No pressure, Deborah. Come on.
I'm not sure whether I got the title right. I think it was a title in progress, or I might have just misunderstood what she was talking about, but I think it is called Motherwell.
Well, I think that when Deborah's book is out, I will read it. I'll be giving it a big plug. Great. She wants to come on the podcast. We'd be delighted. Am I right in thinking, have all your books been non-fiction?
Yeah. No, that's not true. Couch fiction is a fabricated case study. So it is a graphic novel.
What was the process of making that like?
I love graphic novels. And at the time I got the idea for couch fiction, I was reading Harvey Pekar, American Splendor, which was a comic he used to put out from time to time, and it was all amalgamated into one big book. And it's a graphic memoir, not a graphic novel. And for each little story within the memoir, he got a different artist to draw it. And then that just gave me the idea I could get an artist to draw, because I can draw, but I'm slow, and I just could not be bothered. I find drawing, I enjoy observational drawing, but to do all that drawing, it's not the sort of drawer I am. I'm a slow drawer. But my cleaner at the time, Junko Grat, she was a quick drawer, and she'd draw me little notes and stuff, and her drawing was gorgeous and adult, and I think she'd learnt graphic design in Japan, and so she did the drawing for me, and I did the story and the footnotes.
So are you quite a visual thinker? Can you kind of see things as you write them?
No, I'm not very visual at all. But I went to art school, and I can draw and I can make art, but I'm not a very visual person. I am more of a word person.
Did you think when you went to art school that you would be an artist, or
I was
did you just want to be?
I was doing quite well in that I was living in the moment, and I just wanted to go to art school for the sake of art school and being there, rather than thinking about how it might serve me in the future. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And I think if you go with what works in the present, it quite often pans out quite well for the future. So sometimes delayed gratification is good, and sometimes it isn't.
I wanted to ask you about another. I don't know.
You don't know.
I think I've heard of
Marilyn Robinson I think the first one is Leela. There's Leela. And then you get Gilead, and then there's a couple more. So you have got a little treat ahead of you, because she can write about the fate of women pretty damn well, and the fate of men, actually, about how we're restricted by our roles and how we can make the best of it in the roles or break out of them. She wrote another book called Housekeeping. She's one of those novelists, a bit like Anne Tyler, who just understands human beings so well and so.
I love Anne Tyler.
I love Anne Tyler. A spool of blue thread while we're talking about transgenerational trauma. Fabulous. That was her. Was that not her latest? I think it might.
Was it? Did she? I think she was nominated for the Women's Prize. Did she? Is it? God, this is terrible. Is it the Women's Prize? The Women's Prize.
The Costa.
You just get. Yeah, I don't know what. I think it's been. Was it the Costa before or after the Baileys, or maybe it won a few things?
No idea. They always have that party on the same night as the Royal Academy Summer Show, so I'm very split. Art and literature,
What a problem to have.
I know, too many parties. Never know which one to go to. If you like Anne Tyler, you'll love Marilyn Robinson. Both these women understand what it is to be human, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a small dog, what it is to be a train. They understand it in such a way as they cannot help but expand your vision of the world, and that's what we want from a book, as well as to be entertained, and they are both thoroughly entertaining.
That's what I really love about Anne Tyler, is that she seems so... Philippa would like me to point out that Gilead won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction and the Orange Prize and Home won the Orange Prize.
Yeah,
the Orange Prize winning author of Home. But it's about the tiny, tiny sadnesses, and it's not kind of bouncing from sort of tragedy to disaster.
There is big drama, and there's tiny, tiny drama too. And it's so interesting how the tiny, tiny little dramas add up into something that isn't sustainable or something that works. And it's just... I never want those books to end, even if they're describing a world that is constricted. The way she sees it, both Tyler and Robinson, I'm talking about, the way they see it, I just wouldn't mind if I never put the book down.
That would be quite nice, wouldn't it? Like, I suppose when you think how many books there are in Victorian literature that were written as soaps, and I'm an Armistead Maupin super fan.
Oh, me too.
Those were just continuing stories.
Tales of the City, further Tales of the City, great characters that we felt they were our friends, and we wanted to know more of them, and we wanted to hang out with them, even if they were annoying.
All of them that you can remember, who do you think would be your dream client and your nightmare client? As a psychotherapist, who do you think would really benefit from your advice and who just wouldn't listen? In the Tales of the City books? Or in any?
Well, of course, what was the woman called? Mary Lou or something?
Marianne.
Marianne. I'd love Marianne. Love her. I loved her anyway. But I would love her as a client because she wouldn't change. I mean, everybody tried to change her. Michael tried to make her more human and less hard, and he couldn't. It's such a challenge. I'd love to have a go at that. And I don't actually think about who I'd like as a client, because I never think that, actually, I'd really like them as a client, or I'd like them as a client. I never think like that. I think when somebody comes to see you for psychotherapy, you want to uncover what the culture has put on them and find the essential them. And when you're looking at someone from an external way, you're looking at how they're enculturated. So you're not actually seeing them, you're seeing the vision they present to the world. And I am always absolutely thrilled when we peel back those layers together and themselves are revealed to themselves. When they find out who the baby was before the baby was trained to be a certain way, before you adapted to the culture you find yourself in. Who is that essential person? How do they smell the world? How do they taste? How do they experience? And to get right back to that so that they can find out what it is they feel, and from that work out what it is they want, and then go for it. Somebody comes to you for therapy and they gradually realise everything it is they've ever been told covertly and incovertly. What's the word? That's not the right word.
Explicitly?
Covert and not covert. You take everything out and then they only put about what they want. So I would never say, oh, I'd love to have them as a client. I never think that. I mean, I suppose Donald Trump would be the ideal client. What a challenge.
What a challenge.
Find the baby before they were corrupted in him and rebuild from the base up. We might get a human being, you never know.
I mean, if you can do it.
I don't think I can. I don't think there's enough time. People who see other people just as instruments for them, or just as a people to be manipulated rather than people to be equal to and related to. That is the problem we have, that we started to value capitalist values of what you have rather than who you are. And it's almost as though these people believe that the richer you are, the more important you are, rather than everybody's just a soul. I think that's where we've all got lost, because we're just so callous now towards whole races of people who aren't us. It's like we can't enter into other people's worlds. Like we were talking earlier about the value of books for seeing things from different perspectives. I think when we've lost the ability to do that, when we've lost the ability to see what it's like to be poor or what it's like to be a refugee, we're dead.
Well, I think that's the best and worst thing about being a reader. I think that to be a decent writer, you must be empathetic. You must be willing to understand people as you understand yourself and to write about them. And so we are, every time we read a book that we love, we're immersing ourselves in the world of an empathizer, which is, I think, a brilliant thing. And I think we should all do it. And that's why it's so nourishing.
That's why it's so valuable. And that's why I always feel a bit, when somebody tells me they never read. I think
hell of a red flag, isn't it?
It's sort of, well, I don't know. They might be empathetic in other ways, but I really think it does exercise our empathy to read. I think that's a really good point you make there.
But I do think it means it's very hard to empathise with people who don't have empathy. I don't know why you wouldn't be interested in people's lives and why you wouldn't be moved by them.
Oh, well, then that's something you can learn about. Not everybody does have empathy, and what they require from us is just a little bit more adaptation so that we can meet. And it's not, quite a lot of autistic people don't have empathy, but it doesn't mean to say they're in any way bad or immoral. It just means they see the world differently. And I love finding out about that. I mean, Mark Haddon entered into the world of an autistic person when he wrote The Curious Incident of the Dog at Night Time. And I feel like you can't help but love the hero of that book. I bought this. I even just bought it, actually. I bought it. How do you switch the damn thing on? To go on holiday, because I finished all my books when I was on holiday, so I needed a Kindle. Your battery is low. Okay, home. See what I've got on here. Oh, look. How to Own the Room. How to Own the Room by Viv Grosskopf. Fabulous. She taught me about happy high status. Happy high status is when you can just be like kind of normal when you're addressing a room full of people. Who knew? That's fabulous. Now, where do I get to? I'm just trying to find. I've got recommended for you. How can I get back to the index so I can see what I've read so far? Goodreads on... No. Back.
When did you last use your Kindle?
When I was on holiday in October. Your library. Click. That's what I want. Oh, here we go. Look at me. The Anthropology of Childhood. I love anthropology. I've got a book there.
Here, Past and Present in Hunter-Gatherer Studies.
Yeah.
Edited by Carmel Schreier?
You see, I was born in the wrong time. I wanted to be born in a hunter-gatherer society, and I wanted to be born before farming was invented, because when farming was invented, then we had property. And I think all things like property and owning stuff has really set us back on being decent human beings.
Am I right in thinking that, in terms of sort of things were quite egalitarian pre-farming because women were as important as men, and it was farming that changed the way labour was valued?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I've read a lot of books about it. Just trying to see what else I've got on here. Oh, Grid. 1 of 3. How do I get The Circle by Dave Eggers? Again, everybody raved about that. I didn't like it. I thought it was two-dimensional.
Because it's Dave Eggers. I don't think he listens. I think we can take a risk. What was it that didn't appeal? Did you finish it, or did
Characterisation. It was like all the people seemed like robots. I mean, I know that was part of it with The Circle. They all got indoctrinated in it, but even our heroine seemed a bit of a robot, and it's just two-dimensional characterisation. I really have to believe in people.
I need to give a woman a personality. We'll put her in a kayak.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We'll put her in a kayak, like she wants to be in a fucking kayak. The Dry, that was good. Now the 96% that I've read of The Dry goes over the end of her surname, so I can't find it. Hang on. Oh, I hate Kindle. Forget it. Anyway, The Dry, written by someone, and the stickers in front of their name. I enjoyed that. That was a cracking novel set in Australia, I think.
Because that's the other thing.
Jane
Harper.
Jane Harper. Sorry, Jane. Anyway, your novel, The Dry, was great.
But there's quite a lot of podcasts of us trying to work out your name, so there's lots of airtime for you.
Yeah, well, it's terrible that we didn't know your name. I'm sorry.
But there's just a lot to read.
At least we could pronounce it. I know, isn't that fun? Do you think we've got too much choice? Do you think we were better off when the travelling library in a van came to our house and and it only had A to G because the rest of the library was back at the town hall? It was therefore that I read Eric Ambler, and then I got to E.M. Delafield. It was like my favourite novelist when I was a child. I think could have been E.M. Delafield, who wrote The Diary of a Provincial Lady.
She's another observer, isn't she? Really?
And funny. Very funny. Lady Box called. She pointed out that I shouldn't have oak and mahogany in the same room. Well, thank you. She also told me that my bulbs were, and this very critical woman comes in and makes her feel terrible. And we've all had that, and it's just great.
And it's interesting how that's sort of gone on, I guess, from sort of time immemorial, all of that, mad sort of status-driven behaviour.
Yeah, and of course I'm caught up in it. I say, wouldn't it be great if we were hunter-gatherers and didn't have property and stuff? But look at me. I love my pink leather armchairs.
They are fabulous.
Aren't they? I know the cat has ruined them.
Pepto-Bismol
Feel that. That's what the cat's done to them.
Oxygen. You could...
They're only like 4 months old. I know, they're completely ripped to shreds.
So somewhere on Etsy there is a feline distressing boutique that's like, do you want to own a cat that you away a lot? Well,
actually, we're putting him to work on all the sofas in Hoxton coffee bars to distress them. It's how we survive. We send the cat out to work.
Thank you so much, Philippa, who is an even better writer than pie maker, and she is brilliant at pies. The book you wish your parents had read, and your children will be glad that you did, is out on the 7th of March, published by Penguin Life, and it's wise, honest, clever, funny and true. Follow Philippa at Philippa_Perry on Twitter, and if you're lucky, you might spot Kevin the cat. I'm Daisy Buchanan. Thank you so much for joining me between the covers. You can find me on Twitter at NotRollGirl and on Instagram at TheDaisyB. Say hello, suggest some guests, and watch out for shelfies. Visit our show page, acast.com/booked, for more information about our guests and a list of the books they've talked about. If you have any other queries about the podcast, you can email us at whybooked@gmail.com. Your Booked is produced by Dale Shaw for New Alaska and hosted by Acast. Please do subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. It's great to hear what you think, and it helps other people find the podcast. I'll see you next time, and I'll leave you with the words of Far in The Pursuit of Love. I've only ever read one book in my life, and that is White Fang. It's so frightfully good I've never bothered to read another.